Welcome to the Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy podcast. My name is Wanaka Overhuber, and I'm your host. My guest today is John Mark Stroud. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
I like to begin with a question which you can take your time to answer. Is how did you come to see the world the way you do today?
Wow, what a question. Well, like most, I saw the world in an incredibly distorted way, based on how I was raised and what I believed the world to be, what I had been taught the world to be. And that's a pretty scary place. It's not a very joyful place. It's a deeply troubling place. It is a life that's ceaselessly demanding and effectively a fight for survival, mistaking ourselves to be these bodies. But to your question of how did I come to see the world as I see it now, through an avalanche, a tidal wave of grace that I could never quantify in a way that could ever put it in terms that could be understood, a chain of pearls of miracles, if you will. The only thing I can really take credit for is a mastery of willingness, a willingness to be wrong about everything I thought or believed, a willingness to receive revelation in a way that would uniquely inspire me, uniquely heal me, uniquely open my consciousness to something far greater than what my physical senses could report to me. And as I offered that willingness, if you call it the Holy Spirit, you call it God, call it your guides, call it whatever you call it, that inspiration and those miracles came. And they came with such a rapidity that I really felt like I was swept up literally in a tsunami of grace and was merely being carried along. Was it always easy? No. There were some pretty messy stages. Was it always what I imagined or hoped or wished it would be? No. It was far greater than I could ever have imagined or wished it to be. So I celebrate the consciousness that I embody now and the vision that I share and that I have. But it was my contribution to it was nothing but my willingness. The rest of it has been grace. But I claim that grace as my faithful and ever-present companion.
So I love the point of willingness, because that's also important in A Course in Miracles when it speaks of all one needs is a little willingness. And you said you've had a very strong willingness. And so that's beautiful. Would you like to describe how you came to that, or was that natural to you? Maybe you would like to describe how you got there.
Sure. Well, as you know, in the Course, he asked for a little bit of willingness. In one of Jesus's other pathways called the Way of Mastery, he asked for complete willingness. Of course, we'll offer what we believe we have ours to give. I recognized deep within my being that the way I was doing it wasn't working. Nothing was working. Nothing, there was no inner peace. So when I was invited through the Course to offer a little bit of willingness, I thought, well, why just give a little? I mean, I already knew thoroughly that going it alone wasn't going to work. I mean, I had exhausted all of the self-improvements or, peace through attainment of stuff or privilege or whatever. So I was willing to go all in. And maybe that's just a personality trait of mine that if I was going to do something, I was going to do it completely. I wasn't going to dilly-dabble or just play in it. So I did kind of go all in and offered that willingness. And how did that willingness manifest within me? It manifested in a way I was willing to not think so that I could hear. And as you know, in the Course, he says, the proportion to which you'll hear is directly related to do you really want to hear? And I was completely willing to be wrong about everything. You know, I think there are those 7 rules for decision, and the very last one is, well, I don't like how I feel now, so I'm willing to be wrong about everything. And I was willing to be wrong, and joyfully I was. And rather than turning to myself in self-judgment when I discovered I was wrong, I celebrated because what a relief. Thank goodness I was wrong. Thank goodness that wasn't true. That wasn't right. That's not accurate. I don't have to continue to see that way or feel that way or perceive that way. So I celebrated myself a lot for the willingness, and then not getting in the way by thinking and imagining what I wanted things to be. I often imagined a blank piece of paper or a blank canvas in my mind upon which I would take no action to populate. I only wanted that which was the gift of grace, the gift of the Spirit, to inform that emptiness that I was willing to offer. And of course, because I offered it unconditionally, it was filled in equal measure, which was wonderful, sometimes alarming, sometimes a little bit disturbing, but it was absolutely wonderful.
That's amazing, to choose to be completely willing and to leave a blank space, not knowing what will be put in there. That's quite courageous, I think, to put it mildly.
That may be so. I kind of see it as I was a wussy of suffering. I didn't want to suffer anymore. So maybe it was courageous, but I think it was really born out of my own willingness. I don't want to suffer anymore. And that was quite a motivator for me. It didn't feel courageous in many ways. It felt like a Hail Mary, you know. Luckily that was answered. But one of the things that I found myself that was challenging was to remain in that state of emptiness, because I would open, I would get insight, I would hear guidance, or I would get revelation. And then I could feel my own mind wanting to reorganize itself based on what it had just received, which was the opposite of staying open. It wanted to reconstitute. Oh, now I know this is the way that it is, so I can do these things now. And I saw that tendency within my own mind, my own consciousness, to take what I had received and claim it in a way, an attempt to reorganize self, rather than remaining in a state of openness and receptivity. And, you know, I think Helen, she's a famous enough person to mention in this group. She had some of those same issues when receiving the course. You know, Jesus questioned her about her willingness to hear, because we all want to hear. We all want to be validated that we have the right beliefs, or that the way we see things is accurate. We don't want to be told, hey, you don't get it at all, man. How you're seeing this person or this situation or this circumstance is not at all reality. It's a complete illusion. So constantly needing to set this need to be right aside, so that I can continue to offer up a blank slate, if you will, so that I could then receive guidance and revelation. And that continues to this day. I don't want to carry something because it only may have been helpful for me 3 steps ago. What was helpful 3 steps ago may be a burden now. And that's quite a place to live in, that state of emptiness and receptivity, because most of us, we want to know the truth, we want to get it right, and then we want to be able to live in that moving forward. And because if we have the right belief, then we feel safe. But ironically, you'll discover pretty quickly that you're not actually safe, because you need to promote or defend that belief, which isn't peace.
Yeah, that's another issue, the goal of peace of mind. Maybe you'd like to talk about that.
Well, mind itself, as most of us grew up with it and knows it, imagines peace of mind being I get what I want, or I have money and therefore I'm safe, or people appreciate me or honor me or respect me. All the things that we would think would give us peace of mind, of course, never do. I mean, we're seeking magic. We're seeking replacements. And I had already been through a lot of that journey in my life, trying to fill this sense of emptiness with things of the world, only to find out that, like everything else of the world, they're transient, and you can't ever find peace in what's transient. So at one point along my journey, there was a series of revelations about the remembrance and reawakening to that within me, which is eternal. Because, in the Course, he talks about we're invulnerable, unchanging, and unchangeable forever, right? So I was like, well, what's the deal with that? Because I recognize that's not the way I presently perceive myself. That's not the relationship to this physical form. I can't see anything in the world, anything through the physical senses that's eternal. Everything that this body represents and can perceive is temporary. So my willingness to say, okay, I'm willing to set all that aside and open to that which is eternal, so I can know because how can you have peace if the thing that you think will bring you peace, you can lose the next day, whether it's money or your body or a mate or whatever? How can you ever have peace? You can have faux peace, you can be faux lightened, but you're not going to really have true peace. So I was taken on quite a journey of releasing all the attachments that I had to the temporary things and the associated beliefs that within them I could find peace or happiness. And I was guided in a way to discover that which is within me and equally within all beings and has always been there. I just could not perceive it because I was so blinded by the physical senses and the limited apparatus. And once the revelation of my eternal nature dawned on me, reawoken, was illuminated in my mind, however you want to put it, then a true peace came because I discovered not what was unchangeable, but the I that is forever unchangeable, and the aspects of self that are unchangeable and invulnerable forever. And Jesus had a beautiful parable. I mean, he talked about this back in the day when he talked about building your house upon the stone and not upon the sand. I mean, what I'm talking about is what his parable was about. His house, meaning your identity. If you build it on the sand, it's not secure. But if you build it on the rock, the stone, that which is eternal and unchangeable forever, storms will come. And I know we all so desperately want to wake up, and that means nothing negative ever happens in our life again. But he's clear that storms will come, things happen in life, and the house, the identity built on the temporary, will be destroyed. But that house built on the stone will weather all storms because it remains forever untouched, because it's rooted in that which is eternal. And that's what truly brought peace. Not a peace that I had to work for, not a peace that I had to conjure, not a peace that was related to anything that was ever happening, but a peace that just simply is. And not just a peace that is a thing, but peace as an inexorable aspect of self. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah, I think I was thinking about that. Where, trust is the only thing that gives me peace of mind, right? And where do I find that trust? And then all these temporal things came up. Oh, I did this, I managed that, I did this, worked out, blah, blah, blah. I trusted that and that and that. And I was like, where is the source of trust that is not temporal, that doesn't pass or depend on achievement or something that I experienced in the world that we see, even if it's the illusion that we've made, right? So So I was thinking about that. So what do you have to say about trust?
I'll say trust is a very helpful companion to a point, but knowing is what we seek. Because trust is still a step short from knowing. And I don't mean knowing by knowing in the limited thinking mind. I mean knowing in the essence of one's spirit, one's being, spirit to soul to cell kind of thing. Because at that stage, trust is a conscious volition to set down one's knowing and use the tool called trust. So trust is a stepping stone. It's really not the destination, although it's a very powerful stepping stone and a very helpful one. But trusting in what's eternal is a wonderful thing. Being what's eternal is the bomb.
That's a very powerful statement on it. And to be the eternal, yes. Now, so you say trust can be part of the journey, but it's not the end. So being eternal, how can you experience being eternal and yet also be aware of this made up existence that we are experiencing as if it were real?
Well, that's a wonderful, wonderful question. I'll use some Course in Miracles language to help kind of point to this. Mind, we could call it consciousness, we could call it mind, capital M mind. That eternal thing simply is. Yep. But how does what's eternal express itself? How does mind express itself than through ideas? Because mind with no ideas, mind with no expression is nothing. An expression has zero existence without pre-existing mind. Ideas can't exist in a vacuum. They have to exist in mind. So the two of those things actually together in harmony, the eternal manifesting through temporary experiences, temporary ideas, is a union of that which is eternal, unchangeable forever, knowing and exploring itself through ever-changing and evolving ideas of expression. So it's ironic that the very temporary thing that I was trying to get away from contained within it the very presence and proof of that which I had always been seeking, which is eternal.
Yeah. Wow. That's something I think is spoken about in many traditions of oneness traditions, is this exploring of the temporal by the eternal, and yet that replenishing the experience of the eternal. I think that's a very beautiful statement and a beautiful state of mind to be in. Now, another thing is this eternal, and then there's these temporal states of mind, and there's also eternal state of mind. Are they at the same time, or because you were describing it as how it intertwines harmoniously? How do you describe that?
Well, no temporary thing can exist without the eternal present. And the eternal has no existence without the temporary things. So they always coexist. The illusion is, because of our physical apparatus that only reports to us the temporary, we think we're the temporary, and that the eternal is nowhere to be found, or is something distinctly separate or different. It's not. It never has been. It can't be. Literally, it cannot be. But we've believed that it is and created an incredibly, very, very real experience of it appearing to be real and experiencing it as real. When he talks about the tiny mad idea, I often hear people refer to it as we forgot to laugh. And that's not actually what it says. It says we remembered not to laugh. And remembering is an action of volition of free will. So we made a choice to not remember, to not laugh. So we made a choice to abandon the awareness of our eternal nature in order to have a separate, temporary, physical-based experience. And he says in that passage, because we did that, and because of who we are as literally expressions of God, equal in every way, it can have very real accomplishments and real effects. Well, all of us know absolutely real how real our experience of separation has been. And thank goodness that's actually true, because that same power to manifest that state of reality is the very same power with which we awaken to manifest a reality of peace, a reality of our eternal nature. And that's just, and you do laugh at the whole thing, because you realize, oh my God, I have indeed done this to myself. I was never a victim. It was never done to me. And it was done with the full blessing of that which is eternal. It was silently present the whole time, even when I didn't know it was there.
Now, there is that parable where in the Bible, I don't remember exactly, I think it's in the book of Job or something, where he says, oh, you abandoned me because there's only one pair of feet walking, footsteps to be seen. And then God says, no, I was carrying you.
That's part of the lovely irony. When it truly dawns, you can't help but laugh, because it has been there. And the real miracle is that you could actually deceive yourself that it wasn't. It's a miracle that we can actually pull off, using the power of consciousness, using the power of mind, using the free will that God has given us to manifest this experience. Ironically, it becomes the startling proof of how deeply loved we are and how radically, utterly free we are. And that God, as a source of all that is, places no condition, no limits upon us at all. At all. And isn't that really the God we want? Do we want a God that we have to appease or approve or get it right, or not do it wrong, or a God that picks and chooses between us? Of course not. I don't. So ironically, the whole, quote, dream of separation is this like crowning jewel of knowing how incredibly, incredibly free and powerful not only I am, but that we all are. And that we have the freedom and the presence of God with us the whole time while we did that, in order to experience it as though it were real.
That's a big thing for many people who cherish the idea of God, is why didn't you help me? Why didn't you change things? Why didn't you make it better? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you answer when I asked you to? And blah, blah, blah. And all these things. And so you're saying that it's a blessing that God does not do that, or the eternal doesn't do that, but lets us be free. It is like, oh my God, what is that about, when you're having all this debate of why aren't you helping me with and the idea that if God would intervene, that would be actually limiting you. Now this idea is hard to grasp, because okay, then you're saying, okay, we're free, that means we are not limited, but does that mean that we are abandoned, right? Would be the next question, right? And that then you're saying, okay, no, you're not abandoned. Just because you're free doesn't mean you're abandoned by the eternal. Now, how does that's a big thing to grasp.
It certainly is, and I can appreciate. It took me some time to reawaken to it, to grok it, to come to truly know it. Beyond the level of I'm willing to believe it kind of thing. And God does answer us. Ironically, most of the things we pray for that we do get are not the things we truly want. When I was looking for things in the world to fulfill me, what do you know? They showed up. I kind of use this analogy of a mirror, right? You're standing in front of a mirror and you say, I'll be awake when the mirror smiles, when God does this. Well, you're going to wait a long time. Because what's creating the reflection? The secret is I'm doing this to myself. So oftentimes when we're claiming in the mirror, why are you doing this to me? What is the mirror of its perfect innocence compelled to reflect? Why aren't you helping me? What reflection is inevitably comes from that state of being? But I'll go back to my willingness to offer an absolutely clean slate. My slate was filled with that which was the grace of God, because I was no longer looking in the mirror of God, assuming that there had been a separation and God wasn't helping me, right? So the mirror, of course, was reflecting that back through a lived experience. And this is the beauty of God's love. It doesn't pick and choose. We're co-creators. We're the ones that have the power. And this is why Jesus says, choose again, choose again, choose again. If we're not powerful, why is he asking us to choose again? So anyway, I love the analogy of a mirror. And when that showed up on my blank slate one day, I realized most of my prayers were built upon an assumption of separation and were actually perpetuating and validating the very separation that I was trying to free myself from.
Yeah, that's a big one, that what we are asking for is not what is good for us, in other words, or what would make us happy. And nonetheless, you're saying we get it. Now, the question is, we might get a certain form, right? Where we said, okay, if I get that, I'll be happy, right? But that doesn't mean the process of wanting it or the experience of wishing for it was a pleasant
one. No, certainly not, because that's built upon this sense of emptiness born of I'm not whole and complete. I need something to fulfill me. The magic of thinking a thing will bring me a happiness which I have the power, which is already within me, which I'm denying, and then saying, oh, this will do it for me, or that will do it for me, or this person will do it for me. Well, ironically, as we do that, what is it that we're really claiming? We think we're claiming we want this thing, but what we're really claiming is I'm denying my wholeness, and I'm seeking it through magic. And when you really realize that and you get to that depth of understanding, where is this desire being birthed from a sense of separation, birthed from a sense of abandonment, birthed from a sense of fear, all of the prayers built thereon are actually ironically validating the very thing you're trying to get away from. So it can be quite a quandary. And of course, there's nothing wrong with desire. And desire of itself says it is of sire, of the Father. When you truly get to that state of realizing that what you desire is to express from your wholeness, from what's eternal, from a happiness that is intrinsic, not acquired or attained, a peace that simply is the foundation of your being, not the result of situations and circumstances, then it's a whole different ballgame. It's a whole different orientation to life.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can we choose again, as A Course in Miracles says, right? There's always the option to choose again. Now we're so often, like you were saying, you were completely willing to accept that you were wrong about everything. Now that's also choosing again, is to say, okay, I made a choice. Okay, I accept that I made that choice, and that choice might be totally wrong. I'm accepting that it's probably totally wrong because I'm unhappy, as A Course in Miracles says. Okay, I must be wrong because I'm unhappy, right?
The choice my cause has created an effect I don't like. So I do want to choose again. And if there's beautiful, he goes on in the Course about how cause and effect are one. We, of course, believe they're separate. We believe that's the illusion of time. We believe cause and effect are separated by time and affected by things outside of us. And because we believe that, we create incredibly compelling evidence for ourselves. This is really why waking up can be so hard, is because we've all created mountains of evidence of the reality of our separation, the reality of our victimhoodness, the justification of our fear, the justification of our separation. Because our minds are full of those memories which tell us that is what's real. And it's very hard to question what has been our really, really real experience. But when we're willing to do that and choose again, one of the important things to realize is we begin choosing again as the body-mind personality structure that we've known ourselves at. The same aspect of us that goes into a restaurant and chooses on a menu. But when it was revealed to me that, whoa, wait a minute, he's asking you to choose again as a child of God, as an equal to God, as an expression of God, using capital M mind, capital M cause, that's a whole different level of choice. That's a whole different level of authority to choose and exercise the power of free will in a way that is consciously creative, without a measure of time within it. And he talks about, you can choose and have immediate results, right? You can choose peace and know peace immediately. That's rarely our experience, but we can get to that point of acceptance where that begins to manifest in our experience. And then it's even more clear when you're not at peace that you are actually doing it really to yourself, because of an idea that you've made, or a choice that you've made, or an experience that you've created that is less than what you would kind of prefer.
Yeah, it's a big one, because like you said, the thoughts that we have are not giving us the opportunity to choose freely. So the blank slate was what gave you the freedom to choose. Ironically, it appeared like you were giving up choosing, right? Your choice was to allow what something to come in that you didn't know what it would be like. You just, all that you knew is that you'd be happier because of it.
God's will for us is perfect happiness. I was willing to accept my will had not worked out that way. And all of my strategies and attempts and reconstituting of person, none of them had sustainably worked, or they were a lot of work. And I couldn't believe that was my eternal nature. So, ironically, by offering that blank slate, I was claiming absolute authority of choice. Not from a limited point of view. I was claiming self, Christ self, God self, oneness self, in a way that might, to my personality, have felt like a surrender or a giving up. It was actually a claiming of limitless possibilities. Because most of us will carry a couple of options, and we're all looking for guidance to make our tiny little lives on earth just so perfect and ideal. So we'll come up with 2 or 3 ideas, and we want to carry those to Spirit and say, okay, Spirit, do I do this, or do I do this, or do I do this, A, B, or C? And in doing so, of course, we've given them our 3 best ideas, but against infinite possibilities, you pretty quickly realize, maybe I don't want to limit myself to my 3 dumb ideas born out of separation. Maybe I really want to know what's my highest and best beyond anything I could conceive of or imagine. How about that? How about an openness and willingness and receptivity so that beyond what I could even hope for? And there was that one line in the Course, it's not that we ask for too much, it's that we ask for far too little. Well, my blank slate was asking for the full Monty. It wasn't asking for just, oh, gosh, I just want this situation to work out in the way that I want. I was asking for the whole thing. I didn't really realize it at the time. I came to realize that later. But oftentimes, we're seeking guidance to improve our lives. We're not seeking guidance to have revelation of who and what we truly are. And there's a really, really big difference.
Yeah, maybe you'd like to elaborate on that difference.
Well, most of the time, at least it was in my experience and what I've seen in others, is, and because there's such a focus in the Course in Miracles about relationship, and all of us good Course students, we want the holy relationship, whatever that seems to mean to anyone. So oftentimes guidance, we're trying to get guidance on how to fix or repair or alter relationships in ways that we believe will make us happy or buttress our spiritual identity as being loving. But what we're really seeking underneath it all is, I need to know who and what I am. I need to know it in a way that is not a belief. I need to know it in a way that's palpable in my being, in my experience. And the pursuit of those are very different avenues of guidance. In the Way of Mastery, Jesus goes on to say, the only relationship that has any value at all is your relationship with God, your creative source. And most of us in the earth can be so focused on relationships with other people, which is an end-sum game in itself, because the simple fact of the matter is every being has free will. You can't ever affect how they choose to see, how they choose to act, how they choose to behave. So looking for holiness through temporary relationships can be quite a challenge. But when you discover, reawaken, reclaim, whatever, your eternal nature, you realize the nature of holy relationship, because what is your eternal nature is also exactly the same eternal nature of every other being. So there can't be anything but wholeness. There's no way for there to be an opposite that except through misperception. But in reality, you realize that it's absolutely one and the same. My essence, my essential nature, while unique to me, and yours is unique to you, is actually utterly the same. So wholeness is the nature of all beings. And if you look at most of our relationships, it's a dance of significantly less than wholeness, trying to manifest some idea of what we think it should be or would be or whatever. And that ends up manifesting in a whole lot of self-improvement rather than self-realization. And again, those are vastly, vastly different things.
Yeah, the eternal nature of everything and of everyone. Yeah, okay. How do you focus on the eternal while living these lives that we're living that are not eternal?
I would say you don't focus on it, you live from it. Because the focus on it is still as though we're a separate thing and we're turned and we're now giving our attention to it. And I'm inviting a state of being and a level of awakening that is arising as that and living and expressing from it. So like trust, focus would be a tool that becomes unnecessary in being. Because anything that requires mental work or exercise to get us somewhere, again, is built on a foundation of I'm not already that, rather than expressing from that which is already whole and complete. So, and ironically, it ends up being so utterly simple that it's tangible in everything we've ever known. You realize that what was eternal was present in every temporary experience you ever had, high, low, happy, sad, good, bad, in between, and can't ever not be present in every experience you may ever choose to create moving forward. So it's just a very, very different state of being to live from rather than focusing on. But focusing on can be a very helpful step. It's like forgiveness. Forgiveness is a helpful tool. He says it's an illusion and we don't need it. But while we believe we need it, it can be quite handy to have. It's like if you break your leg, crutches can be very, very helpful. But when your leg is healed, continuing to walk on the crutches becomes a burden and a limit. And that's true of a lot of spiritual practices.
Now, another big question that comes up when people speak of spirituality is the idea of what is, how does living from the eternal create a morally acceptable way of living in society and with each other?
Well, that's a fascinating question because everyone has an entirely different definition of what's moral and what's not. And if you just look back through human history, we have taken an incredible journey of morality and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Every generation at the time believes that they are being moral. It was once moral to have slaves, right? And they believed in the righteousness of that. There were many Christian wars in the righteousness of killing in God's name. So when you got to get past morality at all, if you have any hope of actually living from a state of one's eternal nature. Because so long as you're adjudicating and evaluating your choices against this very fluid and temporary thing we call morality, you may convince yourself that, oh, I'm being so righteous, but it's just, again, a attachment to a temporary idea that is incredibly fluid and has always been in human nature. When you realize an eternal nature that has no change, that doesn't fluctuate based on time or century or gender or politics or any of that kind of stuff, then what is birthed of freedom of self is an embrace of self in all beings. And that while there are no mandates on how that can express, I mean, everybody likes to think that Jesus walked around just kumbaya all the time. Well, his money changer tables were a perfect example of sometimes a very loud no is perfectly appropriate. But if you look in our spiritual communities, we oftentimes can be really, really hard on ourselves and each other's against this just as fluid, just as temporary, what's spiritual and what's not. So I would encourage people to abandon that game rather than trying to get it right. And then, of course, projecting their version of what being spiritual or moral is out onto the world and everybody else. Find out who and what you truly are instead.
So the big thing is the idea of moral, of justice, of values, and so on, right? Always leads to different expressions, right? Because people think you have to express it through law, through whatever. There's many, many modalities through which it's rules, whatever, right? And we have all the rules of how to, for the streets, for driving on streets. You have stop signs, you have all these things, right? And we do follow those rules. And I believe that even, I imagine that even people living from the eternal are following these rules to move within society and in the world. And so there's always been this big discussions about spiritual teachers and how they live, right? And if it's okay for, and so there's things that would be seen as let's say criminal or going beyond that shouldn't happen from the point of view of understanding of how we should be and whether how we should value each other as absolutely valuable. And then of course in Miracles it also says we all are infinitely valuable in the mind of God. Now, a person acting from a viewpoint, not respecting that idea, is the question, is that something that is possible when you're living from the eternal rather than the other way around?
Well, there are many, many rules that are very helpful and practical. Not obeying the simple driving laws may put this form and many other forms at incredible risk. And there's no value in doing that to self or any other expression of self. Every being is responsible for their choices because the effects of those choices they experience. And that, frankly, is the greatest teacher. If someone harms others, the cycle of what we might call karma is such that they're going to experience what it's like to experience that. And cause and effect is an incredible teacher in that regard. But every being, no matter what level of consciousness they live from, have the power to choose and create, and they're responsible for their choices. I can only speak from my experience that I have no intent to harm another, nor to violate the collective agreements of others who are living at different states of consciousness, because that is their free will choice. And frankly, that's simply where they're at. They don't know any better. And that's why Jesus said, forgive us all. We know not what we do. Right? I mean, if you imagine a building that has 100 stories and your state of consciousness is the 70th floor, and you're describing this incredible view, and you're talking with somebody who lives on the 10th floor, they simply cannot see that view. And it does no good to make choices that would devalue where they are and what their experience is, nor try and say that your value, your view is better. That's just where they're at. And that level of honoring, acceptance, and respect born out of the value of all beings, the freedom of all beings, informs what I do and how I do what I do. And I'd have no need to prove to anyone else or to show anyone else that they're wrong or that they're missing the point or in anything like that. A limit is accepted as a choice, not as a requirement. And while incarnate in the earth, I'm more than happy to participate in the collective agreements of choices that do support the highest and best for all beings. Now, of course, that could be debatable about what that is, and that could be very different to lots of different beings. But that's where I'm at in my journey, and who knows, next week that might all look very, very different, because gloriously, this is it's never an ending. And that's another thing we could talk about at some point, but it never ends. It's always a ceaseless unfolding and expansion, and not holding on firmly to, I'm there, I know, this is the way that it is a way to stay in the flow of that ever increasing expansion, not being right, which could lead to, conflict and violating other people's free will. So, and I've got about 5 minutes, by the way.
Yeah, that's about right. We have 4 minutes left, so to speak. Yes. So is there any question I haven't asked that you'd like to answer?
Discover, in the course, he talks about the truth is true and it's true right now, and that's the only truth that's true. Seek for that which is eternal and unchangeable. And that will do more for one's journey than dedication to practice and devotion and everything else. Offer that blank slate and master willingness, because that's really all we're asked to master is willingness. And if you can become a master of willingness, then all else will be added unto you. That what I did was really seek first the kingdom, and then all things are going to be added to you. I didn't drag anything onto my piece of paper. I didn't come with my slate, with my spiritual resume and say, how am I doing? Am I there yet? Am I doing it right, kind of thing? So seek for that which is eternal, because when that is known, remembered, reawakened within one's being, you'll truly know peace. Not peace that's the effect of anything, not joy that's the effect of situations, but peace and joy as cause of the very nature of your being.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. So, yeah, I think we could finish the conversation at this point. Unless one of our live listeners would like to ask a question or a comment, then that is very welcome at this point. And otherwise, we will wrap up. Yes, one of our. You're welcome to comment or share, Henry.
During the conversation between you two, John said a couple of times some stuff about the idea that he didn't do what he wanted to do, and so he was changing his mind about that. So it's complex to talk about something like this because the idea of the you and the I and the mind and the consciousness comes into the semantics of it. So my question to John would be, how can you do something that you don't want to do? How's that possible?
Well, we all have experiences of this in our lives, don't we? We all have been, we've all done things we didn't want to do. For me, related to my journey, I didn't want to suffer anymore. And because of that, that was the inspiration that I was willing to do practically anything. And initially, I thought I had to earn or learn. I thought that was the path, but it wasn't. So I was willing to be wrong about that too. But we're powerful beings, and we do have the power to change through our choices. And if there's something we don't want to do, there's certainly no requirement that we have to do anything. But exercising our free will to do things, even if they might not be what we would prefer or want to do, is a level of self-mastery that I think everybody has to come to if you truly want to make a journey. Because if you're just going to go by the lower impulses of what you do or don't want to do, chances are that's going to keep you where you're at.
Well, the point here, from my perspective, would be that that's what they want. It's fine to say we all have experiences that we didn't do what we wanted to do, but I think that's the lie. I think that's where the illusion is. You did do what you wanted to do, and now maybe you disagree that you would want to do it now, but you did do what you did want to do. I'm not saying that, okay, now I want to repeat that. No, this next moment is new. Do you get the point? You've got to unmute yourself.
What I hear you saying is affirming that everyone's always getting what they ask for.
Well, what they want. The will is, because it's a free will, you can never do something you don't want. Like the way you were talking, it didn't fit with the way I was thinking, the way I think. It's impossible. But I understand that I also, like most of the people here, I have been brought up thinking I did what I didn't want to do. But when I get clear with my mind, I say, well, that's the lie. I did do what I wanted to do, and now I have to be looking at it. That's all.
Well, I celebrate and honor our unique points of view in relation to that. I don't think there's a right or a wrong there. It's just born of our own experience. And I honor how you're seeing it, viewing it, and experiencing it.
Yeah, I see it as a Course in Miracles when it says you can't have any experience that you didn't ask for, you didn't want. Okay, but in our experience, we do have the experience that we do something and then we think and we realize we didn't really want that to happen. We didn't want it to happen. Otherwise, we wouldn't be going saying, sorry, I didn't want that to happen, or I'm sorry that happened, or I regret having acted the way I did and got the consequences that I did. So it's a matter of perspective, whether we're going from the side of A Course in Miracles saying ultimately we are the ones who are responsible for everything that we experience, right? And the other is the experience of having done or experienced something that we didn't want, like saying, okay, I don't want to suffer anymore, like John was describing there a few times.
Well said.
Okay, so I would like to thank you, John, for joining us here on the Walking Each Other Home on this podcast. I would like
Fun
to
to
thank
do.
Yeah, it is. And thank you for everyone who's joining us or watching this. Please subscribe to the podcast. Please spread the word. And if you want to be a guest, please reach out to me so that you can be. And if you want to join live, you will see the link to the podcast Telegram channel where you can join the live streams. So blessings to you all. Until next time.
Well.